we're gonna get right into it. I'm sure everyone's seen, you know, kind of the 4-minute launch video, some other things, specs on the website. I'm sure you guys all went there like straight away, so I won't belabor you with too many crazy details, but we will get pretty into it. Basically, I just want to run through some of the main stories that are in the development of this vehicle and things that you guys should pay attention to just kind of out on the trail today, because there was a lot of work that went into this machine. It is completely redesigned from the old turbo, and that's kind of the main story of this. It is absolutely nothing like the RZR XP Turbo that you guys have all kind of known and loved in the past, right? Obviously, the biggest difference is, you know, wider, 72 inches, but it's really not just a long travel kit. That would be a massive undersell of this machine. Literally every piece of this machine has been gone through by AJ and team, redesigned, re-engineered. You'll see it out there. It's pretty special. The one thing that is the same to the RZR XP Turbo as of today would be the power plant, obviously, right? So we're still running 168 horses, but the way we use that power has been obviously completely redesigned. So the drivetrain, the suspension, the tires, everything like that, all brand new. One other piece on the power is that we did increase the top speed from 80 miles an hour to 85 miles an hour. And then we tinkered with the throttle mapping to be quite a bit more aggressive. A lot just to get the tires, the bigger tires off the line faster, but just for some kind of overall performance upgrades for the machine. So the engine calibration is different. But what we're gonna walk into is 3 main facts or messages that we wanna talk about with this machine that really set it apart from the rest of the industry. Number 1, this is the industry's toughest machine. Number 2, it has the industry's most capable suspension. And number 3, it has the industry's most evolved cockpit. So let's get right into the toughest. This machine is running 32-inch tires straight from the factory. I'll say that one more time. You'll probably hear it a lot more times today, but 32s straight from the factory, guys. That's freaking awesome. I know, obviously, a lot of consumers, this is something that they're doing with, you know, aftermarket modifications, putting 32s on. You know, they'll try to control the extra force. Usually they'll put something on like stronger axles, some bigger bolt-ons just to manage that. This is truly the only machine in the side-by-side world that is set up from the chassis to the drivetrain. Every single piece of this machine is set up to run 32-inch tires. You wouldn't think that just changing a few inches does that much from a capability force standpoint to the vehicle, but these are actually driving 2 to 3 times as much load and force into the links, the drivetrain, the chassis itself. We literally had to reinforce and strengthen basically everything. I mean, you can obviously see the just bigger bars, bigger everything. But trust me, AJ and team, literally they were breaking 6 to 8 parts a day for like 2 years, just going through as we were strengthening and redesigning everything. It's like, okay, chassis has to be stronger, bars have to be stronger, control arms. I mean, you can see it just from the front here. Control arms, way bigger, stronger. They're now high clearance, arched in the front as well, so you have even more clearance. The tie rods, the knuckles, the sphericals, the bearing carriers. In the back, these trailing arms are 67% stronger than they used to be. We used to have kind of the little 2x4 of metal in the past. These things are machined now, tubular. How badass are these trailing arms? The radius rods, I mean, every piece of the suspension linkage had to be improved. Up at the front, speaking of drivetrain, like I said, axles, prop shafts, all redone. One of the biggest things is the front drive. This front drive is amazing, brand new. It's about, if you set them on a table, 2 times bigger than the old front drive. It's a massive piece of chunk of metal. It is actually 3 times higher impact strength, mainly because these tires drive so much force, but it is also rubber mounted in isolation. So one of the big detractors to a lot of our new customers to off-road was kind of the feedback you get in the wheel, the pedals, the weird noises that the front drive would make at times being metal to metal with the chassis. Those rubber mounts make this the quietest, smoothest running turbo that you guys are ever going to drive. So I hope you guys can notice or not notice some of that stuff out on the trail today with the quiet. With the tires, so we now are running 16 inches, industry-leading ground clearance. Look at the gap between the frame and the ground. You know, the X3 also very wide machine, a little bit lower style. I promise you guys, things that would scrape the bottom of an X3 would be laughed at by this vehicle. The ground clearance on this is insane. Even though we went to new clearance heights, we are actually at the same center of gravity that we were on the RZR XP Turbo. So it's actually literally within 1% of the old machine. A lot of that is due to a lot of intricate things they did, but a lot of it is due to just the weight of the tires. These things are really beefy, low to the ground, the rotational weight. This thing stays planted, and you know, I can tell you guys, and you can believe me or not, but when you get out there, you're gonna feel this thing just absolutely planted to the ground. You know, obviously one of the biggest things with designing this machine for RZR, you know, we stand for power, suspension, and agility. A lot of our competitors have gone after some of those singular things, you know, power and big travel, and left agility to the side a little bit with longer wheelbases and other design features. We kept a 90-inch wheelbase specifically with this redesign because this is just as flickable as any of our other chassis are. So you can Scandinavian flick them. You know, I'm not telling you to go and do that today, obviously, you probably can't. But these are just as agile. They'll cut like a rail, but ultimately still track like a trophy truck and just destroy everything in front of you. Finally, with the toughness, clutching. So we do have, you know, they messed with the weight, the springs, just the calibration of everything, but the clutch box was a massive redesign. So the new design is flowing 80% more air to better targeted locations that were more heat sinked and maybe weren't receiving enough air and cooling. We're cooling off the secondary now versus the primary, and then we're actually cooling the inboard side of the belt versus the outboard side. Ultimately, all that mumbo jumbo means we're seeing 20% cooler belt temperatures versus our current RZR Turbo, which can't do nearly as much or go through nearly as much load and force and heat as this machine will. So, which percentage? 20% cooler belt temperatures. It's awesome. I haven't seen one of these over 200 degrees, and we ran them in Johnson Valley in the summer, and it was very hot. Secondly, industry's most capable suspension. So that's coming from 3 different things. Number 1, smart travel. Number 2, usable travel. And number 3, a shock upgrade. So the first thing is Dynamics active suspension. That is the smartest travel in the industry, the only smart travel in the industry. It's awesome. I know some of you guys were here for the Dynamics ride last year. I'm not going to belabor that too much, but obviously tuning on the fly, this thing is the most comfortable machine at slow speeds, small bump compliance, and without having to change your clickers or setup, has all of the stiffness that you would need in a bottom out scenario from a jump or a fall, or a square edge, or anything high speed performance. And all of that happens straight from the seat. You're not getting out, you're not changing clickers. You have comfort, sport, and firm for whatever you would prefer. And then in the background, you always have compression moving for cornering, for braking, for acceleration and anti-squat when you're in the air. All that stuff happens no matter what. The biggest thing I can tell you for Dynamics is the old Dynamics Turbo, the 64-inch. I used to run that in sport pretty much all the time just because trying to get as much out of that machine as you can from a compression standpoint, comfort every now and then. This machine can run in comfort a lot longer in a lot gnarlier terrain. Eventually you'll get to a point where you bottom it out because it is comfort, and then I would switch to sport for any of those, you know, a little more exuberant driving situations you guys might find yourself in today. But that's smart travel. Dynamics active suspension, it's awesome. We're the only ones that have something like this. Number 2, we're gonna get some questions here probably. Usable travel. So we have an industry leading 25 front and 25 rear inches of usable travel. This is obviously a new metric that we're kind of bringing to the industry. I've seen some of you guys' reactions already, having some questions about that. In the past, wheel travel, or travel that we've always talked, has been the one number kind of to describe suspension, right? So 19 inches front and 21 inches rear of usable travel. That's the mechanical capability of the suspension. So the arc that the wheels move around the pivot points, 19 front, 21 rear. Obviously the Can-Am X3 RS is 22 front and 24 rear. The problem with that is, because they love to talk about their 2 feet of travel in the rear, is that the way that they're setting up their suspension is no longer to prevent the frame from bottoming out on the ground. If the frame on an X3 RS was smacked down flat on the ground, you could lift the tires up within the travel of the suspension another 3 to 4 inches, depending on the front or the rear. So it kind of doesn't fully represent what you can actually use from a travel standpoint. I don't know how a lot of you drive out there. I personally don't like the frame banging off the ground in really rugged scenarios if I can prevent it, because that means all of that force goes through this very rigid piece of metal directly into the seats, into me. When our suspension is completely compressed or in full jounce, we still have a 1/2 inch of clearance that would prevent you from smashing the frame on the ground. So Usable travel, getting back to it. The way it's measured is if the vehicle is in full droop, if you were hanging it in the air, you would measure usable travel from bottom of the skid plate to the bottom of the tires where it's hanging in full droop. So essentially it's, if you were traveling, the chassis was traveling through to the ground, it would be all of the distance that you could use to travel through before the chassis impacted the earth. So we have 25-25, like I said, that's an inch more in the front than the X3 RS and half an inch more in the rear. And again, that's because where their arch is set up for their mechanical travel, it's not designed to stop the frame from hitting the ground. We feel a little bit like we're taking crazy pills, people talking about 2 feet of travel, but that's why we're introducing this, not to bait and switch consumers by any means, but to add another metric to help them understand what they're actually getting out of their suspension. I'm sure we'll probably have more questions on that, so happy to walk you guys through any of that in more depth after. But I will move on to the third thing here, which is the upgraded shock. So, live valve, internal bypass 3.0s. These things are totally rugged. They're awesome. This is literally the best suspension setup I've ever ridden. In 17, we had the no dynamics. We had internal bypass shocks, right? We moved to 18. We went to the dynamic system and actually decreased the hardware from a internal bypass to a podium RC2, basically single zone with a bottom out cup. And then let the software program across that, which is actually an amazing setup if anyone's ridden the dynamics. On this machine, we went back to an internal bypass version of the live valve shock. So that's a new piece from Fox. It is an absolute monster. And then dynamics was retuned and calibrated to work across the 5 compression zones of the internal bypass, as well as obviously the massive travel on this thing. Suspension is absolutely unbelievable. Again, you'll feel it when you're out there. You don't have to take my word for it by any means. Third and final thing is this has the industry's most evolved cockpit. So, I mean, the biggest thing, obviously you can see the new design, right? All the panels have been touched. There's awesome new lighting on the rear, all LED. There's really awesome new lighting on the front, right? We got the Fang accent lights now, super cool, really aggressive design. But the inside has been completely redesigned as well. Basically anything that you can touch in here, aside from like the shifter and the cup holders, has been redesigned and made more premium some way. So obviously we got the new seats. We have a 4-point harness straight from the factory, something consumers have been asking for. We have a brand new wheel, something consumers have definitely been asking for. This is a Sparco wheel, flat bottom. This thing is a home run. The little bit smaller diameter feels really nice. You're gonna feel it out there on the trail. And then the driving position is actually brand new. So they tinkered with the angles a little bit. This won't sound scientific at all, but basically the wheel is a little bit more down and into you. So just the way your elbows kind of fit, and you just have this really nice setup, really race inspired, really just ergonomically feels better. It's something you'll see out there. However, with the new driving position, we purposefully kept the seat angle within basically the same realm that it was in the former RZRs. We like this upright position, right? If you get into an Ultra 4 car or a trophy truck, any of the things racing out in the Mint, they're not angled back. You know, they want to see what's up there. So kept that. This is the aggressive driving position. And then as well with the design, the hood was kept in a certain sculpted way, so you don't lose or compromise on any of the sight lines that RZR customers would know and love. Finally, like I said, everything else has just been redesigned. So, you know, you got the click outs are all pre-cut, the switches are all repositioned, a little bit of a premium texture, just kind of increase the feel of the vehicle. You got the cluster of gauges right behind, so you got your tack right here, you got your speedo, opposing needles, it starts up, looks super awesome. There's more storage, so actually all the storage has been increased. The center console is also increased and kind of pushed back in a way, so tall guys like me don't hit their knee anymore, which is fantastic. And on top of all of that, ride command comes standard. GPS tracking, navigation, syncing your phone up with Bluetooth, all that good stuff. It's connected to a rear-facing camera as stock on the vehicle, so throw it in reverse, you can see anything, rocks behind you. It's also pre-wired in the front. Literally, if you took the hood off and look back in here, you can see it. Little plug ready to go. Pre-wired for a front camera. It's like one of the cheapest things on our store, so rock crawling, anything you want, you got a front camera ready to go. It literally just pops in, connects, and it's up and running on the screen. So any of these that, if you made a checklist of all the things that you could have premium in a cockpit, went across any competitor, check, harnesses, all that stuff. We stack up with any other competitor, pound for pound, and we have ride command. So this thing is just absolutely awesome. Last thing, just on the design, obviously, moved to a lower profile rollover protection system. The whole thing's beefier, 8-point, a lot more welds than bolts that we used to have, just as far as the ratio. So you got the one continuous piece, and then the two middle sections are all that bolt in. But this thing is just absolutely awesome. It's about a little more than a bar and change lower in the rear than it used to be, kind of from that wedge we had. Just a lot more sculpted like a buggy would be. And then obviously the aluminum roof coming straight from the factory. Something else consumers had asked for. But like I said at the beginning, guys, this is absolutely nothing like the current RZR that we know today. The gap in performance from this machine to the old machine isn't just big, it's literally mind-boggling. And that probably sounds cheesy, and you don't have to believe me once again. When you get out there, you're going to have a moment where you think you're still in a 64-inch RZR, and you're in a scenario where you're going too fast probably for what the terrain would recommend, and you think, okay, I'm about to get hurt or feel some kind of punishment in some way, and then just literally nothing happens. I mean, it is unbelievable what this machine can do, and you guys will see that out there today. Really excited for that to happen. So otherwise, you know, any questions from anybody?
What is the weight difference between the XP turbos and XP turbos?
17 and change. Hey AJ, exact weight on this vehicle as compared to the former turbo as well.
So wet weight is 1835 versus 16. 1835 versus 16.
So about 200 pounds.
It's a 9-gallon tank, right?
Same fuel tank, yep.
Same range, roughly?
Yes.
It depends, you know, how much you're in the throttle, and you're able to stay in the throttle a lot more on these, so the results may vary.
We do also have a fully or largely accessorized vehicle over here. We have brochures if you guys want to check out. So with the frame is completely brand new. We did try to save some of the mounting points for some of our accessories. So the rock sliders we've always had for the XP lineup still work on this machine. With the suspension mounting points changing, the rear and the front doesn't work with the same bumpers. So we have new bumpers obviously, but took care of everything from an accessory standpoint as well. Any questions? Otherwise, you'll have more, I'm sure, as you ride. So we're going to move over to the vehicles now.
Huge front fascia, bigger A-arms, bigger axles, steering rack, front diff, redesigned cockpit. It's pretty awesome. Bigger radius rods, 72 inches wide. Madram 11. This is the TurboS that we beat on all day today. This thing is an absolute beast. I mean, we were hitting stuff 60, 65, 70 miles an hour. You know, factory suspension, everything's factory bone stock. It's impressive what this thing will absolutely do. I really wasn't sold on it at first, but after driving it today and just straight up driving it with no regard, because it's not mine, so it doesn't matter, it's insane what they'll absolutely take. Definitely on my list of things to get. This dynamic suspension is on point. You know, just being able to push a button and change how it rides, pretty awesome. The whole front diff is suspended with bushings, so it's a little different. Doesn't make all that chatter and stuff it used to. It's a lot stronger. Tie rods are bigger, steering rack is bigger. I mean, this thing is absolutely awesome. The cockpit's pretty cool, the steering wheel, you know, gauges right here, and then all of them come with ride command. I mean, it's just an absolute beast. The power is pretty awesome, even with the 32-inch tires, 15-inch wheels. You don't even notice them. Polaris really knocked it out of the park with this one. Super stoked on getting to come out here and test drive this thing and just absolutely trash it in the desert and give it everything we had, and it just took it. So big props to Polaris and what they did with this TurboS, and look forward to maybe getting one hopefully in the next year or so. Just have to wait and see. But so to give you guys a quick update, we'll have full video with GoPro and the Polaris reps actually explaining everything that went on. But it's an impressive machine, and you know, it got it done. So peace out, guys. Appreciate it. Subscribe, madram11.com.